welcome to a special edition of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host this time around. My name is Ben Hanson, joined by Dan Tack.
That is Ben Hanson, and I am Dan Tack.
Welcome, Dan Tack. You wrote an entire cover story on Call of Duty Infinite Warfare.
That I did.
You visited Infinity Ward. You spoke to the developers.
Yep.
You guys wrote a bunch, but we're at the end of the month, and as customary with Game Informer's podcast, we Skype in the developers and ask them some questions from the community. So we posted something on the site asking for people's questions. Believe it or not, it was 6,000 about multiplayer details.
Yes.
And they're not going into multiplayer details at this point, which is sad, but also some other good questions.
I'd love to know more about multiplayer, too. As a big Call of Duty fan, multiplayer is pretty much what I stick to.
And we might ask them about Call of Duty multiplayer details coming up on the end of this podcast interview. But for this episode from Infinity Ward, we have Brian Horton, who's the studio art director, and we have Jacob Minkoff, who's design director. Brian Horton, he was the director for Rise of the Tomb Raider. He actually worked on Medal of Honor, if you want to go back to the roots of the roots of the roots of Call of Duty. And then Jacob Minkoff came from Naughty Dog. He was the lead designer for the train sequence from Uncharted 2. I think that one made a splash in the industry.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah. So talented couple guys. So we're going to volley a bunch of questions from the community towards them. So here's the interview. Brian and Jacob, welcome to the Game Informer Show, and welcome back to the Game Informer Show, I guess, for Brian over here.
Hey, thanks, man.
Thanks for coming on, guys. So we have a bunch of questions from the community. We're going to dive right in, get some new answers for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare here. So to start out, on a more general level, before we get more specific and nitty-gritty, Yamut Al-Kafar writes in, and he's just wondering, he says, what makes a great game? But I guess let's narrow that down to, like, what do you think are the key ingredients to, like, a compelling, interesting single-player campaign in a Call of Duty game?
Jacob, you should take that one first.
Oh, really? Come on, you're experiential gameplay guy. Well, so both of us have made experiential games in the past. And
hang on, I'll pause you right there. What does experiential games mean?
So experiential games are games that are about evoking emotion. They're about putting you in set pieces, in allowing you to experience things that you've seen in like Hollywood blockbuster movies and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Okay.
The goal always is to immerse the player when they're, even though we're using mechanics and gameplay loops, that you want to feel like you're playing a story, and that the story and the gameplay are sort of synergistic. They're not separate from one another.
And so it'd be tough to have like an open world experiential game. It's more of a linear set piece driven type of structure.
Well, that's what we're trying to push things forward. So we're not just creating linearity. It's about making sure that you're immersed in the environment. So for instance, Jacob is working on the Retribution, which is this amazing hub space that we have in the game, where you're going to be able to experience that at your own pace at places. And then there'll be moments when you'll be on the roller coaster ride. But we're really trying to let you off the leash a little bit more in this game. And that's really why we think our particular angle on this might be slightly different than past Call of Duties, because they've always been very experiential. They've always had big roller coaster moments, but we're also trying to introduce another pacing as well, something that really focuses on in-game storytelling.
Sure. Jacob, sorry, I rudely cut you off. So did you...
No, it's all cool, man. Like, Brian always answers that question better than I do. The point is just that, like, fundamentally, video games are about gameplay. They are about the gameplay loop, and lots of people talk about, the 18 seconds of fun or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're making something like Call of Duty, what you're making is, like I said before, a playable Hollywood blockbuster. And those, you look at the structure of a movie, and it has its ups, its downs, its set pieces, it has its quiet story moments, and its large bombastic action. And the gameplay loop is woven in among those pieces, but it's really about making those peaks and valleys that an experiential game is about.
Yeah, for sure. So, Brian, you've been on the podcast before. You're the game director for Rise of the Tomb Raider. Congratulations, by the way, on that whole project.
Oh, thanks.
But Jacob, is this your first Call of Duty game, or where are you coming from, man?
Yeah, this is my first Call of Duty game. Prior to this, I worked at Naughty Dog on Uncharted and The Last of Us. And now, yeah, I'm really excited because, I've been a fan of Call of Duty, since the first one came out. I remember back in 2003 playing the first one. And, like, the first time I saw a dude take cover against a door jam, and he was, like, posted up and he was looking over at me and back, I was like, oh, my God, wow, because I never played a game up until that point where I was with a team and I felt like I was part of a team. And so, like, that was an experience. that I had seen in films but never played through, and it just blew my mind. And then I used all the tricks that I learned from Call of Duty and all the subsequent games I made, like the way people take cover, the way explosions work, the way you draw the player through the environment were things I learned from Call of Duty, and finally getting to work on one is super exciting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing as well. I mean, we often talk about the games we've made, and we coined it Call of Duty moments. Like, these are the big action set pieces. This is what was always my aspiration, is how do you create these moments that are both scripted, but at the same time let you be a part of the action, right? And that's ultimately what we're really excited about. Is as much as we love movies, Jacob and I are really big fans of movies and those kind of linear things. I think we also are really compelled by how do we keep enriching our medium and bringing more into that interactive gameplay loop and the players' interaction with their character and with the world.
Yeah, for sure. But Brian, how much does Jacob drop Last of Us? Like, back in the day when we were designing Last of Us, everybody.
I think he was screaming in his chair, but having to talk about anything other than Call of Duty, because that's what we're really excited about right now.
Sure, yeah.
Is there's a lot of experiences that we've had in the past, and we've been making games for a while. But to be able to work on a franchise like Call of Duty, where it's going to reach so many people, I know for Jacob and I, we both talked about this. I mean, it's truly a unique thing, and to be able to have an opportunity to really push it into new places and with new innovations like the Jackal combat and being it on the Retribution and all of these things that we set out to do. It's sort of like kind of a dream version of the Call of Duty we've always wanted to make.
Yeah,
I couldn't echo that more. I mean, as a fan, right? You, particularly as a game developer and a fan, you see like, oh, that was really cool. Man, if I had my hands on this, what would I do with it? Mm-hmm. What's the version of this that I would want to make? And so that's the dream that we're kind of getting to play out now. And with things like you mentioned with the Retribution, having this hub where you play as captain and you get to choose what mission you want to do, nonlinear order, optional side missions. I mean, these are things that we always, like for me, I always saw like, oh man, it would be amazing to be a commander, to be able to do these things. And I've never gotten to make a game that had the breadth of choice and the scope of player motivation that this game has.
Yeah. So on that front, Joe Capricorn writes in, just talking about the breadth and the new places. He says, what planets and moons will you be visiting in this game? Okay,
well, we don't want to do spoilers here.
Okay.
So there's just, we've mentioned a couple. So we of course start on Earth. And from there, once you get control of the Retribution, we will be going all over the solar system. We've mentioned that you go to Titan, which is a moon of Saturn. And you'll have an on-ground mission there.
Cool.
We also have a mission on an asteroid that has been knocked out of orbit. It's spinning close to the sun. It's spinning really, really fast. And when you're on it, because it's spinning so fast, the day and night cycle is like 15 seconds apiece. So you're not just worried about having cover from the guy in front of you, right? Cover here. You also have to worry about cover here, because you have the sun's rays. Since you're so close to the sun, if you get into the sun, it'll fry you. So it's these really cool gameplay experiences that you could never have on Earth, which is why we pushed Infinite Warfare into space. Is like, it's not just about the theme, the tone of going to space. It's also about the fundamental gameplay things that we can do.
That's cool.
Yeah, and not to spoil either, but to understand that the solar system really is the playground we're talking about. But this is a dangerous thing, to go into space. We're still saying that space travel isn't just like, oh, you hit a button and you go there. Every single one of these trips, whether it's the moon, going up from Earth all the way up into the solar, up into the upper atmosphere into space, that's a very dangerous flight. And then anytime the player will be, piloting this massive ship around the solar system, it is going to have that feeling of like, this is a dangerous piece of technology. This is sort of cutting, bleeding edge stuff. And that's how we were grounding this as well. Like, this is still Call of Duty. It still feels like something that we're relating to, but also being in our solar system, this is something that everyone sort of learns in school. So it also gives us that nice familiarity too. So I think those are all the great ingredients that we thought make it feasible for us to think about what a Call of Duty in space might be.
It's interesting to talk about, like, you want it to feel dangerous and to have that in a more set piece. I understand in space it's a little more open, but in a set piece driven game, does that you want that danger to come through, you're talking about in the cutscenes, or actually danger to the player at any time? They might have to die and restart here?
I mean, it varies. There are some sequences where we, I mean, your ship, the Retribution, takes a substantial amount of damage in the opening mission of the game, and the captain is killed, and you, as highest ranking naval officer, are promoted to commander of the vessel. And then the Retribution is repaired over the course of the game. It's constantly taking more damage, and your crew is basically barely holding it together. And so when you have to travel from one side of the solar system to the other to go and do a mission, there's real danger that your engines are going to fail, that things are going to overload, that there's going to be radiation shielding failure. And then when you are in the environment that you went to, there's real fundamental gameplay damage that you will be taking from these risky places that you're going in the solar system. So it's both narrative to make you feel what it really means to be traveling to such hostile environments that are not meant for humans, and then there's the on-the-stick experience of, that will kill you.
Great. Jordan VG23 writes in, and maybe it's just something you guys can rule out just to give people an idea here. Are there going to be aliens in this game's campaign? Is that the level of sci-fi you're going for?
No, definitively there will not be. Okay. We are looking to make a story about a plausible, realistic future for humans in commerce and in conflict throughout the solar system.
Commerce.
Yeah, that's actually a big part of the central narrative. Is if you think about the Earth resources being, dangerously depleted, and us having to go out, into the solar system to mine them, that sort of drives the whole global economy. Is this new economy out in space? So when you think about that, and that has a tremendous amount of power next to it, that's where a lot of conflict can arise. So the commerce of this is an important part of the equation of the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I can't remember exactly who the quote was, but there was a guy who was talking about asteroid mining, and he said, look, the first trillionaire is going to be whoever mines an asteroid. All right, you have that much money out there. People are going to be militarizing their space stations, their space fleets, their trade routes, and conflict is going to happen. But it's always driven by resources, right? We all know war for oil, and so that's the story that we're making in space.
Huh. So speaking of that conflict then, Roar XD writes in and says, our antagonists for Infinite Warfare are the Settlement Defense Force, who appear to be a group of rebels representing other planets and attempting to secede from Earth's government. My question is, why is this a bad thing, and why do we have to stop them?
So the Settlement Defense Front is this brutal, greedy, militaristic splinter group that actually already seceded from Earth about 30 years ago in our timeline. But since then, they have been pushing into the UNSA is the group that governs space travel and trade in our world. It's made up of all the various countries of Earth, so it's kind of like the United Nations. And they've been taking over UNSA territory. And we actually go to locations throughout the solar system where SetDef has come in, murdered all of the colonists, and then taken over all the resources of that location for themselves. So these guys aren't trying to secede. They are trying to conquer the remainder of the solar system. And if you get in their way, they will eradicate you.
So Roar should stop being sympathetic towards the bad guys? They're not that sympathetic here?
I would probably recommend that.
Okay, that seems fair. Rage272 writes in, he says, in Infinity Ward's past Call of Duty games specifically, the player's character had never had a voice. He was just a silent character. However, in Infinite Warfare, your character now actually talks. What was the creative decision or reasoning that led to this change?
Well, I mean, we are looking to tell a character-driven narrative. We're looking to tell a deep story. And the story that we're telling is about what it takes to be commander of a military force, the difficulties, the guilt, the emotional burdens that you have to weigh, right? A commander has to make really difficult decisions like choose to sacrifice a squad to save a regiment, right? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And those are really, really hard things for commanders to handle. And for you to really buy into that emotional journey, we felt that the character you're playing as, the protagonist, Nick Reyes, needed a voice. And we want to make sure that what he gives voice to is always what you as the player are feeling in these moments. So that's very important. We want to make sure that you have emotional parity with him. But having him have a voice was key to communicating that type of emotional journey.
Yeah, I remember I was on the Call of Duty Ghost cover story trip, and I remember Mark Rubin talking a lot about how, well, Infinity Ward games, the main characters aren't voiced. It's like a Legend of Zelda situation, but then in other Call of Duty series, they are, and so it's nice just to unify the Call of Duty brand a little bit as well. Like, yeah, voice protagonist, of course. Let's go with this.
Yeah, and everything evolves over time, and I think that Infinity Ward still has its own particular flavor of Call of Duty. I often say that Call of Duty is basically its own genre now, right? There's 3 different main studios making one each year, and each of those have their own flavor. And then you have COD Heroes, you have COD Online. I mean, there's so much going on. Of course, you've got esports, COD World League, all of that stuff. So there's so much that I think that within that genre, there's room for many, many different takes on it. And I think that Infinity War really goes for a plausible, authentic, realistic take on what they do. And that's really what excites us about being here at Infinity Ward working on this game, is showing an authentic, plausible, really grounded version of what space military will be.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like Sledgehammer had that approach with Advanced Warfare, but just the space angle is where it takes a new level of let's be grounded in space, ironically. So Demon Boy writes in, and he's a huge fan of Ghosts. He's like, I like the story in Ghosts, love the multiplayer in Ghosts. Why are you done with Ghosts? So is it fair to say, is there a stance that Infinity Ward has taken as far as like Ghosts is no more? And then on top of that, is Infinite Warfare still within the same universe narratively as Ghosts?
So Infinite Warfare is a totally new story. Where we built this world from the ground up for Infinite Warfare. As for Ghosts, I wasn't here on the Ghost project. Right. I started on Infinite Warfare, so I can't really speak to that decision. I'm just really excited to be part of what we're doing now.
Okay, gotcha. I think Dan Tack over here, if he shuts up for a second, has some questions for you guys.
Do I? Well, I don't, but the community does.
That's right.
So I guess let's start with one from XXRARXD, that little classic guy. Will Call of Duty Infinite Warfare have any aspects from Modern Warfare as far as campaign design sensibilities?
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but these are all design questions.
Go for it, man.
All right. Okay, I don't want to be impolite. So Modern Warfare... Okay, sorry, could you repeat it? Because I screwed up.
Oh, absolutely. Will Call of Duty Infinite Warfare have any aspects from Modern Warfare in terms of campaign design sensibilities?
I mean, so we're all really inspired by Modern Warfare, right? There are lots of elements of Modern Warfare that we played, as fans, because both of us didn't work on those. And those defined many choices that we've made in previous games. So I am positive that you will see the DNA of Modern Warfare throughout our campaign.
Yeah, and to sort of build onto that, you're going to have your moments where you have sort of stealthy infills, and then things break out, and you're going to have a big bombastic exit. So those loops that are sort of known recipes and formulas that exist in past Infinity Ward games are going to be in this game. But we also have brand new loops that are really unique to this new world and these new opportunities and these new innovations we've done to gameplay. So I would say it's going to be a hybridization of some classic patterns as well as some brand new ones. And we hope those will start to build into the vernacular of what it means to make an Infinity Ward game.
Right on.
All right, here's one from The Game is the Same. I wasn't entirely sure what to think of the game after the first trailer, but the Sony E3 gameplay reveal just floored me. Infinite Warfare is looking more and more next-generation, FPS-enriched version of Wing Commander. To what extent did that 90s space dogfighter inspire any of the designers, if at all?
Big Wing Commander fan.
Yeah.
Man, I got a PR guy looking at me right across the table here. But I love Wing Commander. And we definitely are inspired by many games from many different genres. And I will admit that was one of them that personally inspired me.
Yeah, I feel like there's that hunger out there, obviously with projects like Star Citizen, they're showing how hungry they are exactly, but there's a hunger out there for like, hey, let's have some space combat, crazy sci-fi experience out there. And you feel like you guys are going to help scratch that itch for the industry a little bit?
I mean, I think so. That's there's a particular type of genre of game of overall feel that really hasn't been done that much in video games, which is really hardcore, authentic military in space, right? How often do you go onto a ship and people are acting in standard operating procedure, everybody's saluting the right person, using proper military dialogue, and you really feel like you're choosing a mission, you're part of a large fighting force, and it's FPS, and it's flight gameplay, and it's like multiple choice, optional hub craziness. Like, these things don't happen. There's no, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to make this game, like when people showed me the prototypes for it, and I was like, oh my God, I have to be a part of this, was because I wanted to play the game where I'm FPS on the ground, looking up at a massive capital ship that comes over me and does an airstrike, and then I get to fly up and do dogfighting like those old 90s games and everything. And there's really never been one that does all of those things in the wrapper of an authentic, grounded military experience. So yeah, it'll scratch that itch, but at the same time, it does all sorts of new things that no one really has done. And I think that that's the most exciting thing for any developers, to work on something that's new and unique. And if you get to do new and unique on something as big as Call of Duty, it's the jackpot, right?
For sure. And a name is safe, and a franchise as safe as Call of Duty. It's nice to be able to be a little experimental there, try some new stuff.
All right. Are the ship sequences scripted parts in between gunfights, or can you control the ship and exit when you choose?
This is from R. Barch, by the way.
That's from R. Barch. Yes.
Good old R. Barch.
Yes.
Sure. So if he's asking about the Jackal sequences in particular, the dogfighting sequences, the dogfighting sequences, you have full control over the Jackal itself. It's not on rails at all. You can choose whatever target you want, fly around 360 around the arena. Once it is time to engage in a zero-G sequence where you have to exit the ship, you will engage in that in a more scripted fashion in getting out. But then once you're on the surface of the hull, you have tons of choice as well.
We call that our wide linear path. So even though you have a destination, there is sort of multiple tacks that you can take. Because we have 360-degree movement, you can sort of use the grapple to go up or sideways or left, right, up, and down. So that's a really exciting mobility style, but still really fast in the Call of Duty fashion because we added this grapple zip mechanic. But space flights can also be engaged from our central map. So in the ops map, you'd be able to, while going through your linear story and progression, choose some of these missions that will allow you to break off and do a dogfight mission or do a ship assault on your own pace. So that's the other kind of really exciting innovation there, is when you're able to go, if you're a Golden Path player, you can go all the way through, and there'll be some events that you'll have to do some of these missions of dogfighting and ship assaults. But if you're really digging these things and you want to do them on your own pace, then we give you that ability as well from the command center, which is really cool.
Yeah, we haven't locked down our progression quite yet, but we're looking into some cool things that you'll only be able to unlock if you do everything and decide to go to the nines on all of these missions.
Cool.
This one is sort of similar. This one's from Thresher. There is a lot of talk about the freedom players will have in their Jackal, but is there more freedom than in previous games in grounded combat sections, or is it still very much small corridors?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, because when I think about Call of Duty, I don't just think about small corridors. I think about taking a hill like Hill 400 or Point du Hoc, right? These are really cool missions where you were in a very large open space and had many different choices of where you could go. And for us, we've been kind of internally saying future war, old school fight. We want to feel Like, yes, this is a futuristic world. Yes, you have space travel. Yes, you have zero G, but the vibe of it is a more old school battle where you're part of a large fighting force. And the older Call of Duties, the World War II Call of Duties, you were part of a very large group with armor support and air support and lots of infantry around you. And as commander of the Retribution in Infinite Warfare, you're on a carrier that has thousands of crew. And so we really want to go for more of that old school feeling of being part of a large fighting force.
But specifically to the Jackal, once you get into an arena, you have full flight control, and you're not in a trench, right? You're going to be able to fly around and do what you want. But there was questions I had of like, hey, can you fly around the planet? No, we're not going to allow that level of freedom. But there is a lot of freedom in tactics and strategy and how you want to go about accomplishing that mission. So I would say, there is more freedom of control in a Jackal than you've had in most traditional flying sequences in past Call of Duties.
Okay, gotcha.
This one's from Lawrence Powell, and there's a lot here. How do you think your game will compare to Advanced Warfare's exo-based movement? How similar will Infinite Warfare's movement be to the chain movement system in Black Ops 3? And what new innovations will you be adding to your movement system, if any?
Okay. Try to get all three of those.
Player movement.
So in terms of relationship to Black Ops 3, it's very much in line with that. Now, we do have missions that are old school, hardcore boots on ground. Like when you start out on Earth, it's exactly old school Modern Warfare boots on ground. As you move into space, and you now need to be moving in low G environments, in zero G environments, other planets, we give you what we call your boost rig, which has RCS thrusters on it that allow you to move around in those different environments. That's also when you get access to the grapple in zero G environments. So the grapple is obviously a new thing that was not in Black Ops, and it gives you a lot more freedom to move around in zero G space. The chain movement is still present. And then, like I said, grapple's an improvement. A big improvement we've done with the grapple, because zero G is non-axis aligned movement. So, for instance, you're not always on the ground pointing upwards, right? You're not always like that. If you need to flank somebody who's behind a piece of cover behind you over there, you can grapple to the ceiling, and instead of flanking them from the sides, you can flank them by grappling above them and upside down, then shoot down on them. So that's like a whole new type of movement that hasn't existed in Call of Duty at all before. And of course, there's all of the Jackal movement as well, which is a new type of movement for the player to master. But we've made it very, very intuitive. It feels just like moving on the ground.
Yeah, and I would add to that, to Advanced Warfare, we're not using exosuits, meaning you don't have superhuman strength in that way. So I just wanted to make a very clear distinction between Advanced Warfare and what we're doing.
Okay, gotcha.
Sure. Rival M asks, will the mechs in the trailers be playable vehicles?
Silence.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Okay. It's spoiled that you'll never, ever touch a mech. Let's see. So Z11Z asks, how in touch are you guys with the forums? Are you guys reading a lot of internet feedback on this game so far?
I do read feedback.
If you go to like the Call of Duty subreddit, I'm guessing you keep your eyes on.
Yeah, I do.
Right
Jacob, I don't know if you do.
I do.
Yeah. So Darth Furtada asks, he says, personally, I think the game is really cool and looks great, but many people online were clearly disgruntled by the announcement. How does the development team deal with that type of snowball that happens where it's like, oh, it's disliked on YouTube, let's keep this rolling?
Look, you make a game that you believe in, ultimately, is what it comes down to. We work on games for 2, 3. I actually had a game in my career that I worked on for 5 years before it was announced. And to get you through 2 years or half a decade of development without being able to tell anyone, in many cases, not even your loved ones, about what you're working on, you have to have a really strong passion for it, a really strong belief in it. So when you release your first reveal, regardless of whether the response is super awesome or like people aren't sure about it, you still have the same passion for it that's been driving you for years. And then, what you hope is that as you show more and more of your game and people get a feeling for what it really is, they start to get the hands-on, they start to see the story trailers and the gameplay trailers and the B-roll, then they get a really good idea of what you're making, and hopefully that your passion comes through to them and that they buy into it as well. So yeah, everybody sees stuff on the forums and they think whatever they think about it on the development team, but you still have that passion. And you say, I know I've been working on this and I believe in this, and I believe that when people see more of it, they're going to be as excited as we are. And what I've been gratified to see is that as people see more of the game, they seem to get really excited about it. So hopefully our passion is coming through.
Yeah, and even like the E3 demo, especially because it doesn't open and kind of prime the pumps by revealing the title. Like I feel like a lot of people were persuaded, like, what is this crazy sci-fi, grounded sci-fi, but sci-fi nonetheless experience? Like I'm on board for this. Like, oh, Call of Duty, what the hell? So even
I have no idea how that decision got made. I have no idea who made the call, but I don't think any of us were even thinking about it in that context.
Yeah.
But it worked out really well. I think it was a great reveal.
Yeah, and so even if there are some hardcore fans who are like, enough with this sci-fi, there's plenty of people that we mentioned earlier that are like, I'm ready for another sci-fi shooter experience on current gen. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I am.
I would hope so. You've been working on it for a long time. Sorry, Brian, you're going to say something?
No, I said sign me up. I just going to agree that we have to believe in what we're doing. They're long affairs making video games, and there's a lot of things that until they're done, you don't know, but it's the one place where you have faith, right? And our team has a tremendous amount of faith in the game we're making, and we know that every day that we keep working on it, that we just get more and more excited and can't wait to show people what we're making. And like as Jacob said, these are reveals, like we in stages. Like you're not going to show everything all at once, and we're doing something brand new, and with that is going to come a lot of opinions. We have a big and passionate fan base, and we're happy to hear everything they have to say. But ultimately, we believe in this vision, and we're pushing hard to put out a fantastic game for everybody.
Yeah. So Taylor Gray, speaking of revealing more, I was wondering if you guys have a rough time frame for when the multiplayer trailer is going to get out there, or just more multiplayer info, because obviously there's a lot of people that are hungry for nitty-gritty specifics there.
Multiplayer reveal is COD XP, which I believe is September 4th.
Okay. Early September?
Got it. 2nd through 4th.
So multiplayer trailers sometime around then?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
They'll get to see some
They're
footage.
telling me yes.
But we're really stoked that we're able to do COD XP because it really becomes an event, right? Like you bring people together, you get to see, they'll get to play, the game, and that's always a fantastic way to see people experience it is through play. So we're stoked about it.
Yeah, for sure. Right on. Well, Lunchbox wrote in wondering what'll make the game stand out and what'll possibly make us stop playing Overwatch. But is there anything on the multiplayer front you'd like to tease for what's really going to rope people in? Something new?
We can't say anything about multiplayer. The multiplayer team is literally on the other side of that wall, and they would murder us.
Can you pick up the laptop and walk it over to that part of the studio then?
I could say it's just like for SP, they're chomping at the bit to try to show the world what they've been working on, and we're excited about it. COD XP is going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice community event. All right, well that's it. Brian and Jacob, thank you so much for joining us on the Game Informer Show, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And thanks for everyone that wrote in. Thank you, Dan Tack, for sitting next to me like my best bud. All right, and thank you for watching or listening to this episode overall. Be sure to tune in next Thursday. We'll have a regular episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.